Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Kiasha Worthy. I'm happy that we made a decision so that everyone can get their time. Today, I'll be talking about what's love got to do with feeling safe. And this topic really speaks to me because I didn't know that I was unsafe until I started getting into romantic relationships. I didn't realize that I didn't recognize safety properly. And as a result, it led to me being in abusive relationships. And so I like to start with, for you to raise your hand if you ever wanted closeness with someone but felt yourself pull away sometimes. Raise your hand if you struggle with conflict in relationships or have struggled with conflict. And raise your hand if you wonder why sometimes love feels harder than it should. All right. And finally, I want you to raise your hand if you hope to leave more comfortable giving and receiving closeness. And I hope to help you do that today. All right. So as you can see the title, I'm a fan of what's love got to do with it. Thanks to Angela Bassett, I think it's her playing that character. But more importantly, I wanted to start with Tina Turner because I think her life is an example of how we want to approach individuals who have experienced trauma. She lived a life, it started off with instability and abandonment, and her mom left at an early age. And as a result, we all see she ended up in a relationship with Ike Turner, which was, abusive, it was violent, and it took her years to get out of that relationship and reclaim her own story. And so what we can say is this trauma-informed way, the environments we grow up in shape what feels familiar in relationships, even when those relationships are not safe. And so her attraction to Ike was a result of her environment. And so the question is not what's love got to do with it. Instead, it's what does love have to do with safety? My goals for today is to help you understand how ACEs shape adult relationships, how to recognize common survival patterns in relationships. Thirdly, to learn why closeness can feel uncomfortable, especially for those of us who've experienced ACEs. And to identify tools for building safer connections for clinicians. I know there's many of us who work with clients and individuals, and I feel like I'm still practicing this every day, all day. And finally, to reflect on your readiness for healthy relationships. So let's start with my story. I guess I'll start with how I was taught to handle difficult emotions, and I was taught to repress it, and maybe indirectly because of my parents' upbringing and my childhood. But I repressed emotions. I felt like I couldn't take up a lot of space, that I had to be the peacemaker. I had to monitor other people's emotions so that they could feel safe, and as a result, I can feel safe. And what that also meant is that I couldn't be honest. And so with one of the values that you mentioned earlier, like my value that I live in every day is honesty. So I want to be more honest. So what are ACEs? We've been talking about it all day, so we all know what it is, but I do want to mention how that they don't occur in isolation. They often intersect with systemic racism, poverty and housing instability, community violence, lack of access to care, cultural expectations. And I'll transition here to when my pattern showed up. As I mentioned, my pattern showed up in romantic relationships. And Mom, this is your first time hearing this, so yeah, she go hear it. It's my story, it's my honest truth. So I was in my first relationship, one of my first relationships, but one that was really significant to my story. I was searching for love, and for some reason, I guess, I didn't think that being in a same-sex relationship could be abusive, that could be possible. I felt safer, at least I thought I could be safer. And as a result, because of my yearn for closeness, my yearn to be accepted, my yearn to feel visible or for someone to see me, I in turn experienced emotional abuse, sexual abuse. I was manipulated, and I didn't learn how to be safe until the next relationship. So a lot of my me unresolving my own trauma was with another person. And so I didn't have the access or the tools or the wherewithal to understand that this is something I could do alone and in therapy. And it wasn't until I actually started therapy later on for me to discover myself. But my pattern showed up the most in people pleasing. So I like to go through how ACEs show up in relationships. And I want to talk to these like 5 different patterns that we talk about. So as I mentioned, people pleasing, over-explaining, emotional shutdown, hyper-independence, and conflict sensitivity. And honestly, like, I'm sure I was telling my partner, I'm like, I probably do all of them at some point and have done all of them. But the ones that stick with me and I'm still working through now is the people pleasing and the conflict sensitivity. So people pleasing. So you are a people pleaser, and welcome, and I just say like I here, if you notice that you have something that you want to say and instead you choose not to say it for the other person's comfort, right? That usually happens if you've experienced, you were in a household where they valued peace over honesty, where you had to, as I mentioned earlier, to monitor and manage other people's emotions, where you had to look out and say, okay, how is this person coming into the room? You know, and that goes back into the conflict sensitivity, which I'll talk about. Externally, what people see though, and they think is good, they're like, oh, Kiasha or Dr. Worthy is great, she's so kind and she's so helpful. What they see is the kindness, the flexibility, the generosity. They see me giving myself to others. But internally, that people pleasing is driven by fear of abandonment, fear of conflict, fear of rejection. I stayed in those abusive relationships because I wanted to matter to somebody. I wanted to feel close. I wanted to be loved. The cost of that, though, I had trouble saying no. I suppressed my own needs. I dealt with resentment. I stayed too long in unhealthy relationships. What I want to note here is that as a people pleaser, I learned to shrink myself so much, I didn't know who I was. And then we've been talking about that, like not knowing who you are, realizing at some points, like, actually, I don't want kids. Like, I'm okay with that. And before, there's just certain beliefs that I was taught growing up that I thought were my beliefs, but they weren't. It was me trying to be accepted by other people in the group because I thought that was keep me safe. All right. The next is over-explaining. I hate this one. Again, I do this one too. Do you find yourself feeling like you got to explain yourself 10 different times in 10 different ways just for someone to understand your intentions? People, yes, okay, all right. Externally, well, I'll start with where it comes from. As a child, you likely grew up with someone devaluing your emotions, right? Not making space for you, making you defend yourself for how you feel, or even dismissing your emotions. So now you grow up feeling defensive, right? Like, of course I'm mad, you know what I mean? Or of course I'm angry or I'm upset, and then you gotta explain that even further. Externally, what it looks like to everyone else, it looks like someone who talks in circles, to be honest. It looks like you don't ever give it up. Like, you still talking about that thing again? But that helped me and helped others stay safe. Like, I gotta prove myself, I gotta prove my worth to other people. Over justifying how you feel. You keep trying to clarify your intentions and you struggle to let something go. But that is not because, you can't let it go. It's like you fear being misunderstood. There is anxiety about being blamed, even being blamed for your own emotions of how you feel internally. And then there's, again, a strong need to prove your intentions. And lastly, the cost here is that it creates anxiety in the way that you communicate. You start to feel misunderstood. And the other part here is like, you get exhausted from constantly trying to prove yourself. And that takes a toll on your nervous system, which we've been talking about all day. All right, emotional shutdown. As I was going through this, I was telling my partner, I'm like, I can probably, if I was vulnerable enough, I could put a family member's face on each pattern here and just see how we all relate to one another and how we resolve conflict. One person shutting down emotionally, the other person people pleasing, the other person over explaining. No one feels safe. Everyone's trying to prove their value to one another. and to be seen. So emotional shutdown is when you're in the middle of conflict, you're talking about something heavy, or it's a tense conversation, and your brain just goes blank. And your body inside, you want to leave. You're just like, it's overload. We call it cognitive overload, right? Where your brain shuts down. We talked about the reptilian brain, right? That is our way of being safe. It's like, wait, this is too much information. Let me just power down to stay safe. Externally, what it looks like though, especially if you're in an argument with or in a conflict, even if it's healthy conflict, which we'll talk about, it looks like you don't care, even though you really do. You really care about what's happening. You just don't know how to regulate to be present, to show up. It also looks like you're being emotionally unavailable or avoidant. But that is driven by overwhelm, emotional flooding, racing thoughts, difficulty organizing your feelings. And chances are you grew up in a home where having emotions wasn't safe. It wasn't allowed. It was dismissed. You were neglected emotionally. And so the only way to be safe is to shut down. The cost is difficulty engaging during conflict, appearing distant or dismissive, and your partner's feeling disconnected. So the reason why I also brought up this topic is because I really love and enjoy working with couples. And so a lot of what I do is help them identify the patterns that are showing up when they have conflict. Because most of the time they come in, they're like, oh, I'm here because we have bad communication. That's like right? Everyone says they have bad communication. I'm like, it is more than how you're communicating. It's about what's underneath the communication and what you're communicating about, right? But before we jump to that, let's talk about hyper-independence. And I know a few people in my life who are hyper-independent. This is someone who never asks for help, right? Because you probably grew up in a home that if you ask for help, you'll be disappointed. Yeah. Or you've had your parents with just the situation you were in, if you lived in poverty and all this other stuff, you had to rely on yourself, right? So asking for help is a form of vulnerability. That means you're opening yourself up to being let down, right? And if you are let down, that one time you open yourself up, you're like, fuck this, I ain't opening up again. You know what I mean? Like, that just confirms that bias that I'm never gonna open up, right? Externally, what people see is that you're someone who rarely asks for help. You struggle to rely on others, and you can appear emotionally let down. And imagine what it's like for your partner, or even in your friendships. They just want to support. They want to give you a corrective emotional experience that we talk about in therapy. They want to show you that you can rely on them. But for you, you're like, I'm not opening up. And the other thing I want to mention here is that all of these different patterns are ways that we stay safe. And so that is the part that we want to understand is this behaviors that we see is our attempts at safety. That means that something is wrong with us, that we're bad partners or whatever it may be. It's just wow, you had a hard childhood. Tapping into that pain that person may have experienced. Internally, you have this fear of disappointment, fear of vulnerability, fear of being let down. And the cost is the difficulty trusting others, emotional isolation, and reluctance to ask for help, even when you need it the most. I give a good example. I shared, I'm gonna put you on the spot real quick. So this is just a small example. So we get out the car, I picked my mom up from the airport, and I had already had a lot of bags. I was setting up for the tabling. My mom gets out the car, she has her suitcase. Mind you, my suitcase is already in the hotel, I don't have a suitcase. My mom grabs her suitcase and all the bags that I picked up from Family Dollar and just put them all in her suitcase. And she's holding them. She's holding the plates of food that we got from Olive Garden. And I'm just sitting there, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna let her have it, because I got this conversation tomorrow. But it was my stuff, and for her, productivity kept her safe. This is how she shows up. So I was like, I'm gonna let her have it. I'm not gonna go back and forth and let me take the bags, because that's what keeps her safe. Conflict sensitivity. If you grew up in an environment where it was hostile, there was a lot of conflict, your nervous system is wired. And I often say this to my clients, unfortunately, trauma teaches us how to read the room, right? We are so attuned to understanding people's emotional experiences, even when they aren't, right? Like you come in, you're scanning, you're hypervigilant, you're like, oh, something about to go down in here, or like, this is off. You're noticing every subtle adjustment. And sometimes, most of the time, it has nothing to do with you. Right. But you make it about you because that's how you maintain your safety. So as a result, when conflict does arise, what you do, you have a racing heart. Your muscle tenses. There's fear that conflict will escalate and a strong urge to restore peace immediately. And so that's why I think conflict sensitivity and people pleasing goes together, because you sense the conflict and the only way you've learned how to diminish it or minimize it is by people pleasing. Externally, what people see is that someone who becomes anxious during arguments. You try to quickly smooth things over. You want to get to the solution right away. You don't want to talk about really the problem. It's like, oh, someone mentioned about taking the garbage out. It's like, they don't really want to talk about the why or what happened and all this other stuff. It's like, I'll just take the garbage out. Don't worry about it. You know what I mean? Like, just let it go. We want to ignore the problem because that's what makes them feel safe. The cost, though, is avoiding important conversations, anxiety during normal disagreements, and again, prioritizing peace over honesty. Which pattern do you recognize the most?
Just knock the whole thing. Yeah.
You're an ace with 10? Are you still working through them?
Well, I'm a doctor in social work and I'm an LCSW, so a lot of it is my own therapy and my own clinical care. But yes,
Yeah, I feel like for me it's an everyday practice.
regardless of your
Yeah.
skills and regardless
Yeah.
of your education, and they still sometimes govern because that reptilian brain is real. And it takes over 0 to 1,000 and education doesn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a young lady, Addie said she loves you guys. We've been trying to get her on, the virtuals have been going well. And she's like, my perfectionism has kicked in. And the last slide that you just had, I screenshot, I said, this slide is free. Because we're all here because we have aces and aces.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So which patterns do we recognize? Shame on you all if you don't, because I'm guilty.
And that's why I put the cards down, because this is my perfectionism. All of these cards, this is my people pleasing, to not do the wrong thing, to make sure I'm attuned to everyone's nervous system. Like, okay, let me go make sure I said this the right way. And so I needed to put it down because I am valuing honesty.
Yes. Yes.
Now that we recognize the pattern, there's something we can do about it, right? We all know that. But first, we're going to pause for a second, and I want to make space for the clinicians in the room. So oftentimes, especially if you're a new clinician or regardless of the environment that you work in, it can be hard, especially if you do couples therapy, when couples are fighting and they're arguing and they're escalating. Sometimes you just don't know what to say. So I want to normalize that. But what I do want to show you is I have my own tools, my go-to tools that I think work, and I have some of my couples who had success with me, which they all do. That's from God. They gave me some of the things that they felt that also worked for them, and we were aligned with that. But I want to talk about recognizing patterns in real time, what to say in the moment, and how to regulate the room. So I want you to remember that you are a tool. Like I shared earlier, trauma is like our military boot camp, right? If I notice that couples are dysregulated or if they're overwhelmed and I'm feeling and I'm like, oh crap, what am I gonna say? Chances are they're feeling overwhelmed too. So I note that. I make myself the regulator. If I'm overwhelmed internally, I try to slow myself down and I model that for them. And so I'm noticing my internal response, and so as a result, I slow the pace in the room. And I respond, I don't react to what's happening, because they're used to that. They're used to someone reacting without slowing it down. With that is recognizing the pattern. People pleasing versus cooperation. People pleasing comes from a place of fear.
Yes.
Shut down versus regulation. Shut down comes from a place of overwhelm. So when I see that, if I see a client or one of them is people pleasing, I ask them, what are you fearful of right now? To give them that language, because a lot of us, I mean, we are educators, we are in this space today, they may not have ever learned that language or been able to identify what emotions they're experiencing. And I sometimes, especially with clients who probably have very high ACEs scores, they're like, I don't even know what I feel. So I give them that emotional wheel, and we work our way from the sadness to the happy, and we just keep going, disappointment, disdain, whatever it may be, right? And we work our way through that. And then the next thing I do is, again, I'm a tool, I'm identifying the pattern recognition and like what to say. You don't have to say the right thing. There's no perfect language to slow someone down. Just me being calm right now often slows people down. I'm modeling something new that they've never experienced before in their life, even with their own dynamic. I may say, let's slow this down. I'm like, wait, whoa. Sometimes I even say, whoa, okay, what's happening here? Just to slow them down and help them regulate. What's happening in your body right now? I'm noticing a shift. This also gives them language and helps them be able to be more introspective about what is happening in my body right now. I noticed that my heart rate is racing really fast, or I'm starting to sweat. You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean? When was the last time you experienced that? When was the first time you've experienced that? And then client escalation. We can pause the interaction. We can regulate them before processing. And again, going back to, I know I said this before, we want to model what they need. The last thing I want to say here, we want to model what they need. And what I mean by that, and maybe I'll go, hold on. Okay, no, it's here. So here's some of my signature tools. Before I meet with any couple in their first session, I do a consultation. And I give everyone this spiel about it's not about the potatoes. And, I'm doing the consultation. I'm asking them, what brings you to therapy at this time or couples therapy at this time? Not another time, but what about what's happening now? And so they tell me, and then they ask me my questions, and then I say, you know what? I always like to start with, it's not about the potatoes. I had a couple, it was one of my very first couple cases, and they came in, they had been arguing for 3 days. They hadn't spoken in 3 days, and it was all because an argument about potatoes at a grocery store. Mm-hmm. One person wanted a bag of potatoes. The other person thought we should just get single potatoes because we only gonna eat 3 tonight. And they didn't speak. And you can feel the tension. They even argued about the potatoes for 30 minutes. And I'm new. This was my 5th year. I'm like, what are we talking about? So I said, it's not about the potatoes. That's all I said to them. It's not about the potatoes. It's how you feel about what she said, or maybe there's a deeper issue, right? And what we've learned, what I helped them see is that one person felt that they didn't have a say in the relationship. The other person felt that I got to make all the decisions in the relationship and you're not listening to me. And so anytime I say that, everyone can relate. And I remember one recent consultation, the guy said, it was a married couple, a straight couple. And the guy said, yeah, we just had a conversation about that over some groceries or something. And then the wife was like, it's too soon for that. So she wasn't ready to talk about that. But we're talking about it's not about the potatoes, it's more so about what the moment represented for each person. The other thing I do is sort of normalize the repetition of conflict. I don't know if you all are familiar with Gottman's Institute research, and so one of the things they mention is that 69% of the conflicts or the conversations that we have or disagreements we have with our partners, we will continue to have for the whole duration of that relationship. Imagine. And so when people come to therapy, they say, we keep arguing about the same thing. And I'm like, I hate to break it to you. You're going to continue to argue about the same thing. It's not a you problem. It's not a them problem. You're different people. Yeah. My own therapist tells me, she's like, there's 2 eyes in a relationship. That's so corny, but she's right. You will always be 2 different people. And so whether it's about finances, whether it's about values, or whether it's about dreams or passions, or even something as simple as chores, which a lot of couples come to therapy and they're talking about chores. but it's not about the chores. It's about their family, you know what I mean? And how they were raised. It's underneath. It's not about the chores. So what I tell them to do, I'm like, okay, let's create a bucket. You go do this at home. We'll call this the conflict bucket. And you're going to put in all of the recurring themes that you talk about, you fight about every single time. And what we start to do is build tools for each pattern. We're normalizing it. We can handle it together. We've done it before, but it looks different every time because each person's at a different stage in life. You know, you didn't meet that person where they are today. They've grown. And so I love to do that. The other thing I do, especially during moments of escalation, is what do you need right now? I slow them down and I remind them not what you think or you should need or somebody told you, but what do you need? Not what you expect to say, but what do you really need in these moments? And sometimes people don't know, and that's also okay. I don't shame them for not knowing. I help them discover what it is they may need. Sometimes they need support, but it may not be the way in which their partner can give them that support. So I talk to them, okay, well, what does support look like to you? Well, a hug, and sometimes people are like, don't touch me, don't touch me in a session, and that's okay, but their partner wants to touch them. That's not what they need right now. They're telling you what they need. They don't need to be touched. They need you to listen. They need you to ask questions. They need for you to be curious. So we want to communicate clearly, respond intentionally, and I love to ask this question when I can sense it, because again, my nervous system is just like a radar, just scanning. I'm like, what are you holding back to keep the peace? In this relationship, what are you holding back to keep the peace? And just let that sit. How many of you have held things back in your relationships to keep the peace? And that never goes away. You're still holding it back. You know what I mean? Like, it shows up. Yeah. It stores in your body. And I can see it in sessions. I'm just like, this person holding something back. And they're so afraid to share it. So then you know what I do? I give them the space. I say, you know what? Next week we're going to meet, just you and me. And we're going to talk it through so that we can share with your partner the next week. The final tool, which I love the most, and this is one that one of my couples, they're a star student. They love to be a star student. They're my nerves, but I love them. The inner child reframe. If you've been in a long-term relationship, you know your family, you know your partner's history, you know their childhood. And so I usually ask them, what part of her childhood or his childhood or their childhood you think is showing up right now? And that simple question softens everybody's mood. Because when you are in conflict with your partner, you're more willing to react. But when you see their pain and you see, oh my God, they just wanted to be seen growing up. And so, their passion in this argument is not because, they disagree with me. It's because that little girl in there needed to be loved, needed someone to just say, hey, okay, I see you. I understand. That softens you. And, some people may not do this, but a break is sometimes necessary with couples. When patterns keep repeating, when I feel like they are stopping their own growth, when I feel like they need to focus on individual therapy, because couples therapy ain't for every couple, right? Sometimes you got to work on your individual stuff before you bring it to the couple space. Because I can't spend all day talking to Tori about her problem and leave it. I'm sorry, I put you on the spot. Right? And also when regulation isn't possible in the space. And then when identity is lost in the relationship, sometimes couples need to be away from each other to see who they are when they're not in that relationship. Who are you when you're not a wife, a husband, a mother, and all this other stuff? Who are you? All right, so now we're gonna get back to the tools for everyone else in here, right? If you're not a clinician, so we're back on. So is my relationship safe? So if you're in a relationship now and you have this question, safety in relationship includes disagreements without punishment, emotional honesty without ridicule. You don't want someone making you feel bad for expressing this are your feelings, that's your feelings. And someone who respects your boundaries, not constantly trying to negotiate with you about something that matters for you or overstepping them consistently where you have to now over-explain. We just talked about that. And someone who is willing to repair after conflict. Conflict will happen, okay? We're gonna normalize it. And safety, I keep saying safety and all this other stuff. I define safety as how conflict is handled. Because everything is good when it's like rosy, you're in that honeymoon stage, you're getting along and it's light and it's fun. But as soon as you have a disagreement, how does that person show up for you? How do they make space for you? How do you show up for yourself? Do you, shut down? Are you ready to be in a relationship? Quick relationship check. Someone mentioned this. Your body often recognizes safety before your mind does. So when I go into the room, I automatically felt safe coming in here because my body felt it. So I just calmed down. But do I feel safe disagreeing with this person? Do I feel respected when I express my needs? So just think yes or no here. Do I feel anxious? Do I feel silenced? Do I feel responsible for managing their emotions? And do I feel supported in my growth? Sometimes we don't really look at that one enough. Do I feel supported in my growth? Mm-hmm. Well, how's that? Tell me more about why that was so important. Yeah, I'm curious.
I agree with that so much because of the fact that I believe like coming up, I know I wasn't supported, and I know that in me looking for someone or wanting to be with someone, that's what I needed the most. Is support. It's for me to give it to myself.
Absolutely.
To grow, and then that person come and then to add to that support.
Absolutely.
But yeah, do I feel supported? So that's the important thing, is to know that person comes into my life to add to it. But I was expecting that person to actually be the support.
Yeah, to be your therapist, to be your parent, to be all these different roles. And that's another thing I tell couples is that your partner cannot be your everything. They cannot be your everything. I'm sorry. You're not my everything, You're the parts that matter. And why healthy love can feel uncomfortable? Because our brains have been wired and our bodies have been wired to scan for danger. So healthy love, and what's his name? I can't think of the doctor. What's the doctor name? Body Keeps the Score? Yeah, Vanderkart. But he talks about this. The reason why healthy love can feel uncomfortable to our nervous system is because we are suspicious of it. And sometimes it feels boring. That's a big one. A lot of my clients who are in healthy relationships, they sometimes get out of them because they're like, it's just boring. I just don't even know what we're doing. I mean, he's so nice, like he don't ever want to fight. There's no arguments. He understands me. You know what I mean? What'd you say? Yep.
If you grow up in dysfunction,
Mm-hmm.
and even if you become healthy, what we do, a lot of people that have pieces for our clinicians, we just live in healthy dysfunction, right? We make ourselves really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
We face negative dysfunction for healthy dysfunction and still dysfunction.
Absolutely.
When you have, or it looks like it's going to be healthy, not only is it suspicious, but it's also overwhelming. Like this can't be real.
Yeah.
Like, what are you?
Yeah, what are you up to? Yeah, I don't deserve this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So some tools for change for all of us, and this is still what I find myself working on, is noticing your emotional triggers, regulating your nervous system, expressing needs honestly, and building self-trust. So naming the pattern, can everyone see? Ask yourself, and naming the pattern, we talked about the 5 patterns that show up, and I'm sure there's more, but I like to focus on those 5. When we name the pattern, we're asking ourselves, what happens in my body during conflict? We're making this a holistic experience because, again, our body registers safety when it's not safe, whatever, before our brain does. So if we can be more in touch with our body's cues, it'll help us with naming the pattern. And naming the pattern helps us stop the autopilot to go into shutting down or to be conflict sensitivity. If we can name it, then we can stop it. But we got to be able to name it first, and we can change it if we can name it. So the other thing I want you to ask yourself, do I move toward people or away from them when I'm experiencing this pattern? Do I silence my needs to keep the peace? Pausing your nervous system. Some reset tools. We had a bunch of tools, so that I don't even got to go over this part. Slow breathing, stepping away briefly during conflict, grounding yourselves. What is it? Noticing 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, the humming. We have a bunch of tools that we talked about earlier. And then practicing expressing your needs. Not what somebody told you should be needing, not what they think you need, but what do you need? And also being okay with not knowing what you need. And having a partner, having a lover that accepts even when you don't know and was willing to support you in trying to figure it out. That's what safety is in a relationship. Sometimes you just need a moment to think. Maybe your partner wants to handle conflict right away. And I always needed to process because most of the time my nervous system was overwhelmed. It was overloaded. So I needed time to just, you know what, I hear you, and let me just go for a moment. Sometimes a couple of hours, and I can come back. And now my emotional processing, I'm more aware of what I need, how I felt. Maybe I should have said something differently. And even saying that hurt my feelings. Can we slow this conversation down? And the other thing I want to mention here is like timeouts are healthy, guys. If you notice that you're escalating during conflict with your partner, take a time out. Take a time out, but also before you leave, before you depart, say, okay, we're going to handle this again in 20 minutes. Set a time for yourself. Okay? You can't just take a time out because that can lead to sweeping it under the rug. Yes. And then you go back acting like nothing happened today. What you want for dinner tonight? You be like, you know? That's ignoring your needs. And as we do all of these steps, we are simultaneously building self-trust. We're starting small because we're noticing our emotions. We're able to name the pattern. We're honoring our limits. And we're following through on our commitment to ourselves. All right. So if you're not in a relationship, this is a question for you. Am I ready for one? Signs you may be ready. You recognize your emotional triggers. You can communicate needs even when they're imperfect. You are open to growth and feedback, and you don't expect a partner to fix your pain. Healthy. I remember having a client who would tell me, I know my depression, I would no longer be depressed and anxious once I get in a relationship. I'm like, girl, that's going to activate your depression and your anxiety and everything else. Yeah. I'm like, whoever she talking to, I wish I could let them know that this is what she. Healthy relationships require self-awareness, not perfection. And the first relationship that we're building is the relationship with yourself, by the way. And so as a result of the work that I do, and a lot of times, I'm working with couples and even individuals, and especially if they have a high ACEs score, if they don't have a safe environment, they can't practice the tools that they are taught in therapy, right? They don't have anyone they don't have a safe environment. And so as a result, I decided to create a community that I'm just starting. So if you're interested, please sign up. It's free. It's called How Are You Really? We're taking the mask off. We're going beneath the I'm fine, because that's what I say all the time. I'm okay. How are you? I'm okay. I'm good. But I'm really not good. Maybe I had a long day and I'm tired. Maybe I'm emotionally exhausted, but I don't feel safe enough with you to share that information. Mm-hmm. So we need more spaces where people can be honest about their emotions, explore their patterns together. Mm-hmm. Sort of like here, we all are building and learning from one another and experience validation. How many of us really needed validation as kids, and we still need it now, probably even more so. I do need to be perfect here. So I want you to take a moment and notice your body right now. Are you holding tension anywhere? In your shoulders, your jaw, or your chest? Just take a slow breath and see if anything softens. Now imagine what it would feel like to be in a relationship where you feel emotionally safe. What would be different for you in that relationship? Would you speak more openly? Would you feel more at ease in your body? Would you feel less pressure to perform or protect yourself? Who are you when you feel safe? Are you more present, more open, more relaxed? Notice what your body feels like in that version of safety. Is your breathing slower? Are your muscles more relaxed? Do you feel more grounded? Whenever you're ready, come back to the space. For many people, that version of safety doesn't feel familiar yet, but it is possible. And part of this work is learning how to recognize and tolerate that feeling. Thank you so much. And I want to end with this quote, if I can, Tori, if that's okay. Dr. Tori. When we understand love as the will to nurture our own and another spiritual growth, it becomes clear that we cannot claim to love if we are hurtful and abusive. Love and abuse cannot coexist. Bell hooks, all about love. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I told y'all. Now, before we go over for Angelique's, what we're going to do for anybody that has a table, we're going to move in here. I'm gonna put a smile on my face. The expo wasn't supposed to go on the whole entire day. It was supposed to be break expo sessions. So we're going to move all the sessions in here.
Okay.
Because that's how serious it is to me. So if your table is out here, your table will be moved in here. So move your stuff in here. Those doors are going to be locked, and then you'll stay in here because people are more distracted on what's going on outside than getting this content here. And if y'all know Dr. Tori, Miss Williams, or whoever you remember, when it comes to education, I have zero tolerance for certain things. And so we're moving everything in here, effective, ta-da. We have a table outside, we do that. While the people are getting their tables together, if you guys could give us that time, Francine, see you later. And we're going to go check out Angelique. And if you have your table here, that's fine. We're going to go and check out Angelique right now.